What my Amish husband did every night before bed seemed normal, until I left and realized no other man does this. The lamp is still burning when he kneels down beside the bed, not on the bed, beside it. On the cold pine floor, in his nightshirt, with his back to me and his head bowed so low his forehead almost touches the quilt. I'm 20. No, I just turned 21 that spring. And I am sitting up against the headboard with my hair still wet from washing, and I am watching the back of my husband's neck. He prays, out loud, every single word. He asks forgiveness for what we are about to do. He asks the Lord to keep the act clean. He names it. He names me. He lists what is permitted and what is not, the way you'd list groceries. The lamp hisses. The wind pushes against the south window, the one with the crack in the bottom pane from the hailstorm 2 summers before. My toes are cold. I press them under the quilt, and I do not move, and I do not breathe loud, and I wait, the way Mama waited, the way her Mama waited. He prays for 9 minutes. I counted once, 9, and I thought, every man does this. I thought this was what husbands were. I was 26 before I learned otherwise. Quick pause. My name is Rebecca, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what did your community teach you to call holy that you've since learned was something else entirely? And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. In the old order district where I grew up, the body was a borrowed thing, not yours, loaned to you by God for the purpose of obedience, work, and children. In that order. You didn't speak about it. You didn't look at it longer than you had to in the wash basin. You certainly didn't ask questions about what happened between a husband and a wife after the lamp was blown out, because the lamp wasn't blown out. That's the thing nobody tells you. The lamp stays lit. The praying happens with the eyes open and the Lord watching, because anything done in the dark was considered the devil's territory. I learned that from the way my Aunt Saloma whispered, "In the light, child," always in the light, when she was braiding my hair the morning of my baptism. I was 16. I didn't know what she meant. I just knew her hands shook a little when she said it. The rule lived in everything. It lived in how we sat on the bench at preaching, knees pressed so tight together a piece of paper couldn't slide between them. It lived in the way the married women's eyes dropped when the bishop said the word marriage bed from the pulpit. One quick downward glance, in unison like birds turning on a wire. Once, when I was maybe 14, I asked my sister Mary why the Yoda girl had to leave for a season and come back quiet. Mary just looked at me. She didn't say a word. She handed me the basket of beans and tilted her head toward the porch. And I understood I had to on something I wasn't supposed to step on. And I carried that. I carried the not asking into my own marriage like a dowry. His name was Eli. He was 23 when we married. No, 24. I always get that wrong because his birthday was right after the wedding, and I count from the wedding. He had hands like his father's, big and red at the knuckles from milking in the cold. And he had this way of looking at the ground when he was about to say something kind, as if kindness embarrassed him. We courted for 11 months. We were alone together exactly 4 times before the wedding, and 3 of those times my younger brother was sitting on the porch within earshot. The preparation I received for the wedding night came from my sister Mary, 3 days before. In the kitchen, with the yellow curtains Mama sewed from a flour sack, she said 13 words. I counted them later, lying in bed. 13. It will hurt. Don't cry out. Pray with him. The Lord will bless it. That was everything. I loved him. I think I loved him. I don't know if I knew what love was yet, but I know that when he came to the door on a Tuesday, and it was a Tuesday, because the bread was still rising on the back of the stove, and he asked my father if he could walk with me to the singing, my chest got hot, and my ears got hot, and I had to look at the floor for a long time. He was gentle with the animals. That's what I noticed first. He'd talk to the workhorses in a low voice, almost a hum, and they'd lean their big heads against his shoulder. I thought a man who could do that with a horse would know how to do that with a wife. I didn't know those were two different languages. Neither did he. The week before the wedding, the women came to help with the quilt. They sat in the front room and they stitched and they talked about everything, except the one thing I needed them to talk about. Mama's friend Lydia made one joke, something about Eli being a good, clean boy, and the other women laughed in a way that wasn't really laughing, and then they changed the subject so fast I felt the wind of it. That night I sat on the edge of my bed and I tried to ask Mama. I got as far as Mama when you and Dat, and she stood up and went to check the bread. She didn't come back for an hour, so I learned. The silence wasn't a missing thing. The silence was the thing itself. Our bedroom was at the back of the house, above the summer kitchen, with one window facing the orchard. The first night, after the supper and the family prayers and the slow walking up of the stairs, I sat on the bed in the white nightgown my grandmother had sewn. She'd done the tatting around the collar herself, tiny knots that took her 3 weeks, and I waited. The lamp was a small kerosene one with a smoke-stained glass. The quilt was the double wedding ring pattern, blues and creams, the threads still tight because no one had slept under it yet. It smelled like cedar from the chest where it had been kept. Outside, an owl was calling from the orchard, and a dog 2 farms over answered it, and I remember thinking, this is the last quiet I'll ever know as a girl. That's an exact thought. I remember it because my throat closed when I thought it. He came in. He didn't look at me. He set the lamp on the dresser, and he pulled at the seam of his left sleeve, over and over, the way he did when he was nervous at gatherings, and he said, "Rebecca, I'm going to pray now." His voice was small. He looked like a lost boy who'd wandered into the wrong room. I nodded, but he wasn't looking, so I said yes out loud, and my voice came out crackling like dry leaves. He knelt down beside the bed, not on it, on the floor. His knees made one soft sound on the boards. I could see the back of his neck where his hair stopped, that pale strip of skin that hadn't seen the sun, and I had this thought, sorry, give me a second. I had this thought that I should look away, that looking at the back of his neck was somehow more naked than anything else that was about to happen. So I looked at the lamp instead, and he prayed. He prayed for forgiveness for what we were about to do. He prayed that the Lord would keep it clean. He prayed that any child that came of it would come of God's will and not of the flesh's wanting. He did the act. He named me. He listed, in a low voice, what the bishop had said was permitted and what was not, positions, times, days of the week when the marriage bed was not to be is of the church calendar. The lamp hissed. My fingers found the loose thread on the quilt and I started pulling. I don't remember when I stopped breathing through my nose and started breathing through my mouth, but I remember my mouth going dry. When he finished praying, he stood up. He blew out. No, he didn't blow it out. He turned the wick down because the lamp had to stay lit. He came to the bed. He sat on the edge first with his back to me for what felt like a long time. Then he turned. His hands were shaking. I could see them shaking. He said, "Mary told you what would happen." And I said yes, but I hadn't been told anything, not really. And he hadn't been told anything either. And there we were, 2 children with a wedding band on, looking at each other across a quilt that smelled like cedar. He reached for my hand. I wanted to pull away, and I wanted to move closer at the same time. His hand was cold. My hand was colder. The rest of what happened, I won't describe, because the thing that mattered wasn't what happened. The thing that mattered was the praying. Before, during, after. After. He got up off the bed, and he knelt down again. He prayed again. He thanked the Lord, and he asked forgiveness one more time, and he asked that the act be remembered as obedience and not as want. And then he climbed under the quilt, and he turned his back to me, and he was asleep, or pretending to be asleep within 5 minutes. I lay there. The lamp was still going. The owl had stopped. I noticed the quilt had a loose thread where I'd been pulling, and I pulled it more, slowly, until a whole inch of stitching came undone. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just lay there until my legs went numb and the sky outside the orchard window started to go from black to that thin grey. That comes before the rooster. Here is the plain fact, and I'm going to say it plain because softening it would be its own kind of lie. Neither of us understood that what happened between a husband and a wife could be something a woman wanted. Not endured, wanted. We didn't have the word for it. The word didn't exist in our community, not in the preaching, not in the kitchens, not in the whispered talks between sisters. A woman's body was a field, a man's body was a plough, the harvest belonged to God. There was no concept of a woman's pleasure, because a woman's pleasure was understood, quietly, as a thing that didn't exist, or, if it existed, was suspect, worldly, a doorway the devil could come through. Eli prayed every night before he came to me because he'd been taught, by his father and his bishop and the silence of every man before him, that the act itself was a sin the Lord forgave only because children had to come from somewhere. He wasn't a bad man. I need you to understand that. He wasn't trying to hurt me, and that's what makes it worse, because if he'd been cruel, I could have named it cruel. But he was kind, he was gentle, he prayed for me. He prayed over me. He prayed before, during, and after, for 13 years of marriage, and not once in those 13 years did either of us know that a wife was allowed to feel anything other than duty. I learned later, when I left, that there is a word for what a body is supposed to feel. There is a whole map of a woman's body that I did not know I had. I lived in that body for 26 years before anyone told me it was mine. And I carried that. God, I carried that, so I learned to leave my body. That was the system I built. By the time we'd been married 2 years, I had a routine. I would hear his knees hit the floorboards, and I would send myself somewhere else. The orchard, usually. I'd picture the orchard in October, the way the apples got that red so deep, it was almost purple, and I'd walk myself row by row down the trees while he prayed and while everything else happened. I would come back to my body when he turned his back and went to sleep. That was my survival. That was the trick. I never told a soul I did this, because I assumed every wife did it. I assumed the orchard, or some version of the orchard, was just what marriage was. The body did its work. The mind went visiting. The Lord, presumably, was pleased. I almost found out otherwise once, at a quilting bee, the spring our second baby was teething. It was at Sister Fanny's house, 8 of us around the frames, and Lydia, the same Lydia who'd made the joke before my wedding, Lydia spilled her coffee on her apron and said, low, without looking up, "Sometimes I wish he'd just leave me be." 3 women laughed. 1 didn't. That one was a young wife named Annie, maybe 19, married 6 months. Annie's hands stopped moving on the quilt. She said, very quiet, "Is it supposed to?" And Lydia cut her off. Cut her right off. "It's supposed to be what it is," Lydia said. "You pray, you bear it, you ask for grace." Annie's needle started moving again. Nobody said another word for an hour, and I sat there and I knew, the way you know a storm is coming before you see the sky. Every woman at that frame was somewhere else inside herself. Annie didn't make it. I don't mean she died. I mean she left, but not the way I left. She left the inside of her own eyes first. By our 3rd year you could see it, the way she looked through people instead of at them. Her husband was a deacon's son, a serious boy named Amos, and he was not cruel either, and that is the part that I cannot stop saying out loud. None of them were cruel. They were sleepwalking. They were doing what their fathers had done, because their fathers had done it, all the way back to a country none of us had ever seen. Annie had a baby, and then another, and somewhere in there she stopped coming to the singings, and then she stopped coming to the quiltings, and the women said she was having a hard season, and the bishop's wife visited her once with a basket of bread, and the basket came back empty, and Annie stayed quiet. 4 months later I heard her praying out loud in her own kitchen, alone, with the door cracked, asking the Lord to take the wanting out of her. I don't know what wanting she meant. I never asked. That's the thing nobody tells you. You don't ask, because asking would mean knowing, and knowing would mean you'd have to do something, and there is nothing to do inside the silence. I left when I was 33. I won't tell that whole story today. There's so much more I haven't said yet, but I will tell you this. 6 months after I left, I was sitting in a small office in a strip mall outside Lancaster, on a grey couch that smelled like other people's coats, and a woman with kind eyes and a clipboard said a word to me I had never heard before. She said the word consent. She drew a small diagram on a piece of paper. She used the words arousal and anatomy and boundaries, and she said them the way a person says bread or table, like ordinary things, like things that belong to me. My hands started shaking, and I couldn't make them stop. I put them under my thighs, and I sat on them. I was 33 years old, and I was learning, for the first time, that I had a body that was supposed to feel something other than duty. I went home being a 1-bedroom above a bakery, with a mattress on the floor and 1 lamp, and I sat on that mattress and I didn't move for I don't know how long. I wasn't angry. That's the thing that surprised me. I thought I'd be angry. I was just sad, devastatingly sad. Sad for the girl who sat against the headboard with wet hair on her wedding night and counted her husband's prayers. Sad for the girl who walked the orchard inside her own head for 13 years. Sad for Eli too, and this is the part that's hard. Sad for Eli, who knelt on those floorboards every night because some bishop 100 years ago had decided a wife's body was a doorway to hell, that prayer had to seal shut. He didn't know. None of us knew. We were all kneeling in the same dark room and calling it light. And I carried that. I still carry that. I tried to tell a woman at the bakery once. She was kind, English, maybe 40, and we'd been talking about marriages. And I said something about how my husband used to pray before. And she laughed. She thought I was making a joke. When she saw my face, she stopped laughing. And she said, "Wait, like, every time?" And I said yes, and she didn't know what to say. There was no road from her life to mine. There was no bridge. I stood there with flour on my apron and I realized I am from a country that has no map. The people who hurt me can't see what they did, and the people on the outside can't see what was done. I am the only one standing in the middle, holding both sides. That is the loneliest place I have ever stood. And still I miss things. I miss them so much my chest aches some mornings. I miss the sound of the workhorses at dawn, that low, soft snort they'd make when they smelled the oats coming, and the way their hooves sounded on the packed dirt of the barn floor, like a heartbeat that was bigger than mine. I miss the bread my mother made in the wood oven, the crust so dark it was almost black, the inside still warm enough to melt the butter into a yellow pool, and the smell of it filling the whole downstairs on a Friday. I miss my grandmother's hands when she was praying. knotted, brown-spotted, folded so tight on the kitchen table that her knuckles went white, and the way her lips moved without sound, like she was telling the Lord a secret only the two of them knew. Those are real. Those were given to me. I will carry them until I die, and I will not pretend they weren't holy, because they were. But the harm was real too, and here is the sentence I have spent 6 years learning how to say. What happened in that bedroom, every night, for 13 years? That was silence dressed up as holiness. That's what it was. Beauty and harm can live in the same house. They lived in mine. I am not here to burn the house down. I am here to walk through it with the lamp turned all the way up, and to name what was in each room, and to leave the door open behind me so the next girl knows she's allowed to walk out. I still pray sometimes, different words. Mine, now, and sometimes, late at night, I think of Eli kneeling on those floorboards, and I hope, God, I hope, that somebody told him too. That somebody drew him a diagram. That somebody said the word want to him like it was bread on a table. If you grew up somewhere, your own body was kept from you like something dangerous. Somewhere the word want was a doorway the devil came through. I see you. I see the girl who learned to leave her body before she ever learned it was hers. I see the woman who counted prayers instead of breaths. You are not broken. You survived something, and surviving is enough. And the shaking in your hands riffles when you hear certain words is not weakness. It's your body finally being allowed to say what your mouth wasn't. You are not the only one. You were never the only one. The community's best-selling lie is that you are. And to the woman still inside it, washing the dishes tonight with the lamp lit and the prayer waiting, I see you, and I am not going to tell you to leave, because leaving is its own country and not everyone can cross. To the woman who left and is sitting in a strip mall office learning new words, I see you, and your hands are allowed to shake. To the woman who is thinking about leaving and hasn't told a soul, I see you, and you don't have to decide tonight. To the woman who just realized 3 minutes ago that what she thought was every marriage isn't, I see you, and I am so sorry, and I am so glad you know. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. If there was one sentence that stopped you, tell me which one. I read them, all of them, even the ones I can't answer. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell yet. About the bishop's visit, about the day I packed the one suitcase, about the orchard in October the year I left, but I'm getting closer. If you want to walk with me through those, this channel is Rebecca Amish Home, and subscribing is how you stay. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. Your body was always yours. Nobody had the right to pray it away.